Oh, hi. My name is Bunkong Tuon. I'm a Cambodian American writer, poet, and scholar. I teach at Union College in Schenectady, upstate New York. And I'm reading from my room for the folks at SUNY Adirondack. They invited me to participate in the Visiting Writers Symposium. And a special thanks to Stu Bartow for inviting me. Also to Nancy White for organizing this, and for the professors and students at SUNY Adirondack for their interest in my poetry. I'll be reading about 16 poems from my 3 collections. This is a little awkward and alienating. I hope that things will get back to normal so I can actually read in person. I think it'll be more exciting in terms of engaging with a live audience. Here I'm reading in front of the computer, and it's quite late at night. My children are asleep, my wife is asleep, so I'm able to do this. I'll start with poems from my first book, Gruel, published by NYQ Books in 2015. Special thanks to Raymond Hammond, the editor of NYQ Books, who took a chance on this unknown writer. And I think being published by a press like NYQ Books built a sense of confidence in me as a writer, as a poet, that really was very special, and this book is very special to me. I'll read the first poem because I think it gives you a sense of why I wrote this book, that I was haunted by memories. The house of many voices. You can get lost if you pay attention to the creaking and the sad murmurs underneath the floorboard. I told my wife, whatever you do, don't look over your shoulder, or you will be snagged by a ghost of rice paddies and water buffalo. His heavy black hair still wet from the mist of yesteryear, or a ghost of the missing son, whose memory lives in the furtive glances of uncles and aunts, in the grandmother who refuses death. There are many ghosts here. Listen, I was caught by one of the ghosts the other day, and I'm telling you this, passing on to you, not in some spirit of generosity, but so that I can be free. The second poem is Under the Tamarind Tree. That was originally the title of this book. And I think it's an important poem because this is a poem about origins. It's a poem about this memory that I have of my mother's death, and I was a young kid. And when I said that it's a poem about origins, I think it has to do with why I became, I don't know if became is the right word, but I had no choice. I had to write to release these difficult, painful memories. And in terms of loss, is not only I lost my mother and father, but Cambodia, homeland, and I've been in America for 40 years, over 40 years, and and I live in a place where there's no Cambodian American community, So there's the possibility of losing my language and my culture, the real possibility. And I think I write in terms of trying to recover all that. Under the tamarind tree, the child sits on the lap of his aunt, under the old tamarind tree outside the family home. The tree stands still, quiet, indifferent. The house sways on stilts. Monks in saffron robes and nuns with shaved heads, lips darkened with betel nut stain, sit chanting prayers for the child's mother. Incense perfumes the hot, dry air. There emerges a strange, familiar song between the child and his aunt that day, a distant one, melodic but harsh, as if the strings are drawn too tight. Each time the child hears prayers coming from the house, he cries. Each time he cries, the aunt, the girl herself, pinches the boy's thigh. And so I grew up without a mother and a father, and I think parents are a kind of compass where you can try to understand the world, and if you don't have them, you really don't. You have to figure something else out. I remember um, proposing to my then girlfriend, and I didn't know what to do, who to talk to, and it was very, very difficult. So here's a poem about my father. Lies I told about father. I believe I had the power to revive you, to sit you up in the family pigsty, drunk off your ass, smiling at nothingness, the late morning light shining on your face. With a sun's quiet adoration, I chisel you, a gangster from the east, a Khmer Krom, whose blood cry out Khmer characters, not Vietnamese, who, guided by fate, found himself in the West and married mother for her virtue and beauty. In these poems you drink because, well, real men drink, curse, sleep around. The cursing and sleeping around you didn't do, of course, because of your love and respect for mother. I was an aspiring writer then, renting a tiny studio on Ocean Boulevard in Long Beach, following in the drunken footstep of Charles Bukowski, buying cheap wine, imitating free verse, waking up to the stench of sour vomit. Of course, this life did not last long. I can't hold liquor, let alone women. I've always been a reader, safe behind words, punctuation, and sentences. Between the pages where I can conquer an entire nation or seduce women with my long dash. Now I am engaged to a kind, generous person. Mother would approve of her. I am returning to you once again, not for approval, just to talk, son to father. But it dawns on me, I'm without you. So this poem is about the first time we saw snow, and America, was this magic place where anything was possible. First snow. We huddle behind the back door of our sponsor's house. My uncle, the bravest because he spoke a little English, went out. My grandmother, aunts, and I watched him through the kitchen window. He bent down, reached for the whiteness of this new world, and put some in his mouth. He looked back at us and smiled. We can make snow cones with this. America, the miraculous, our savior, you were the land of dreams then. Because I grew up in America without parents and also in a family of refugees, my uncles, aunts, grandparents were trying to figure things out themselves. So I was left to make sense of my life. And my story, my life, is one where I was saved by literature, by poetry, and that's really my story. It's the heart of my story. So this poem is about that first time where I read something and it spoke to me. How everything changed. I was a college dropout working in Southern California, scrubbing, washing, mopping, emptying trash cans of private homes, synagogues, local schools, offices in the LB shipyard. Nothing backbreaking, just losing a couple hours of sleep each night. One morning, out of boredom, I decided to visit the local library. The kind where old ladies push steel book carts past little children playing, mothers gossiping. The kind where you can disappear quietly into the corner. It wasn't one such corner, hidden away from the sights and sound of suburban mothers and their children, where I pick a random book off the shelf, a book of poems by that drunken old man, a book filled with social misfits and outcasts, drunks and prostitutes, barflies, cockroaches, and vomit. At that moment, I felt my first breath. I was gasping for air. I felt my own sweet suffering in others. Loneliness was extinguished, and compassion bloomed in my heart, in my chest. I'm telling you this so that you know, in the worst storm of your life, this mad love can hit you, smashing you into a billion pieces, connecting you with everyone and everything. This poem is dedicated to my grandmother, Yum Praing. She passed away a couple months, actually 1 month before the book came out. She passed away in April. The book came out in May 2015. It's dedicated to her because after my mother passed away, we left for Cambodia, and she took care of me. She became, she's the grandmother who became my mother. So I'll read two poems from this collection. Dead tongue. I never knew how to thank you. The words don't sound right. My tongue has been cut to fit the meter of another world. The words bounce off walls, deflated, a dead poem. This is the title poem, Gruel. We were talking about survival when my uncle told me this. When you were young, we had nothing to eat. Your grandmother saved for you the thickest part of her rice gruel. Tasting that cloudy mixture of salt, water, and grain, you cried out, "This is better than beef curry." All my life, I told myself I never knew suffering under the regime, only love. This is still true. Now we move on to my second book, and So I Was Blessed, also published by NYQ Press, came out in 2017, and it's a book of poems about my trips to Vietnam, where I met my father's side of the family for the first time. And I went to their village and slept in the house where my father slept. So this is a book of poems about that, but it's also about being in Vietnam as a tourist, and also I was the faculty director of the term abroad in Vietnam, where I led students from Union, from the William Hobart Smith, and so there's these narratives that sort of interweave, interconnect, and then I was also a father for the first time to a little girl. So all these sort of stories, I think, interweave throughout the book. But this is a very narrative-oriented book of poems. I think the heart of it is the story of a son going to see his father's family and trying to know his father. So I'll read a couple of sort of sections from this, a couple of sections from this longer poem. It's called "Searching for Father in Kampuchea, Krom." And that Kampuchea, Krom is southern Vietnam. It's near the Mekong Delta, and it used to belong to Cambodia until after the French left. They redrew the boundaries, and that area became Vietnam. So you have these Cambodians living in Vietnam in their ancestral land, and now they're minorities in that place. So I'll read some sections from this particular poem. 5. They tucked me in like a child, this nephew from America, in his 40s and recently a father. My uncle went around the bed, making sure the mosquito net covered every corner, leaving no chance for dengue fever. His wife stood behind him, checking to see if anything was amiss. I said good night, heard their bed creak, then whispers and giggles. Privacy was the mosquito net and the darkness of the countryside. My father once slept and ate here, breathed this air, walked on this dirt. The bed was hard, the pillows high, my back ached. I tossed and turned, wrestling with thoughts of him. So I I was searching for my father in the gestures, the facial expressions, the stories that my uncles, aunts, and grandmother were, telling. And here's, I'll read two sections from the poem. The first, another section. So here's number 11. Your father, my aunt said, was generous, his heart as big as the sky. She opened wide her arms. Her body leaned to the weight of memories. He invited friends over, bought them dinners. He was a good big brother. He used to come up behind us, wrap his arms around our shoulders tightly. As she told the story, she wrapped her arms around herself, head tilted, eyes closed, weeping. My uncles sat in their corners, blinking, staring at the chicken pecking the dirt floor. And here's the story that they told me of my father. This is my inheritance. 12. My father walked up to the Khmer after they killed the children and opened their stomachs to eat the livers. My father got down on his knees, clasped hand overhead, and begged them for a sliver of a victim's liver so that I would not starve. While everyone was sleeping, my father snapped into the kitchen, stole a branch of coconuts, buried them in the woods. Each time I cried from hunger, he disappeared into the night, dug up a coconut, gave me the juice to drink, and with dirt-encrusted fingers, spooned out the flesh for me, his only child. Okay, this is the third and final book. The Doctor Will Fix It. And a big thanks to editor Teresa Maychuk. And this is Shabda Press. Came out in 2019, just before the pandemic. And it's a book of poems about raising my daughter in Trumped America, in the Me Too movement, raising a biracial girl. So I read poems from here to give you an idea what this book is about. I'll start with Moon in Khmer. And it's, I think it's really symbolic and powerful for somebody like me, a survivor of the Cambodian genocide, to have a family of his own. Under the Khmer rule, the idea of the family was abolished because the family was threatening to the Khmer rule government, just like religion, just like education. These things empower you. And they were afraid that our loyalty would be somewhere else and not with their organization called Angkar. So this is a poem in terms of what it means to have a child for a child survivor of the Cambodian genocide. And my daughter's Khmer name is Chanda, and that means moon in Khmer. So that's the title of the poem. Moon in Khmer. You are light when the sun is punched out and darkness reigns. You are the antidote to what came before. Black blood, black heart, hands tied, kneeling before a ditch of human bones. Your laughter pierces the silence of night that bore witness to the once blood-soaked land. Your existence is resistant to the genocide that orphaned your father and drove his family out of the homeland. You are love against the hate of the Khmer. This is the meaning of your name, Chanda. This is how to defeat Pol Pot. Of course, Pol Pot is the leader of the Khmer. So this is a poem about being a father and how that can evoke violence. That love can evoke violence because you want to protect your child as best as as best as you can. Chanda came home and told us that a girl from school had taken away her toys and hid her. I watched my wife hold our little girl close to her chest. The only fight I was ever in, a sixth-grade girl pushed me to the ground after I told the class I had a crush on her. I spent over a decade earning advanced degrees, reading books and gleaning the wisdom of the ages, moderation from ancient Greece, turning the other cheek from Jesus, and showing compassion for all life from the Buddha. But all I could feel that afternoon was rage. I got down on my knees and, to my wife's horror, showed Chanda how to beat the crap out of another 3-year-old girl. Here's a poem, again, about being a father. It's called The Kind of Father, and it's after Tony Glogler's The Kind of Man. I'm the kind of father who avoids making eye contact with other parents when I drop my daughter off at nursery school. The one who crouches under a classroom window to make sure she stops crying before I go to teach. I am the father who elbows other parents and scrambles for a front seat to take a video of Chanda's pre-school graduation ceremony. I am the kind who wants to beat the crap out of the nurse sticking a needle in my daughter's arm. I am the kind who goes to Target to buy toddler snacks and ends up in an inflatable kiddie pool in the shape of a white unicorn. After I tuck her in for the night, I Facebook pictures of us in that pool. Chanda holding the pink mane, me petting giant pink wings, smiling. I am the father who tiptoes into my daughter's bedroom to check her breathing, whispers a prayer, then plants butterfly kisses on her forehead. I am the kind of father who gets on hands and knees, digs dirt with a trowel, plants flower bulbs, taps the soil to make sure they are firmly planted. Every afternoon, I take Chanda out to the garden, and together we water the flowers, me telling her, this is how you take care of life, how you care for love. Being a parent made me more political, more concerned about the political, social, cultural environment of America and the world. Made me care about the future because I was, thinking about my children and their futures and their, children, and so on. So here's the poem where my wife and I took our daughter to the Women's March in Albany. Women's March in Albany. I take Chanda out of the stroller, lift her high up over my head, and put her on my shoulders so she can see that she's never alone. We are here for her, my wife and I, and the other women and the other women and men too. We will march city streets, climb mountains, and cross rivers and jungles to let her know. Our strength is in our love for her, and her strength is felt in the trembling ground, the demands for autonomy, respect, and decency, no woman left behind, in speaking up and out, in hollering and screaming in songs. Two more poems. This one I wrote right after Father's Day. It's during the time when immigrants were put in cages, fathers, mothers, children. This all happened in Texas and so the southern border. And my wife and daughter were creating this wonderful event for me for Father's Day. And while I was celebrating, I was also thinking about other fathers who weren't able to experience this love and joy. So this poem came out of that. Unhappy Father's Day. With her mother's hand guiding hers, Chanda writes, I love Daddy Monster. I like skateboarding with you. And my favorite, you are an owl. But my joy is mixed with anguish, sadness, rage this Father's Day. Her gift brings up the horrors of those parents who are detained, who watch their children torn away from their trembling hands. Grown men and women weep. Some men hang themselves with belts from Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, because there's nothing they could do. I too was just like them. My aunts, uncles, grandparents took what they could carry, me and my grandmother's back, and we left Cambodia to seek refuge in America. How is my family different from theirs? Legality is but a line drawn across the desert to keep out the inhuman. Tents are constructed, warehouses converted into holding cells. Parents and children are separated, placed in corrals like cattle. A child with a Michael Jordan t-shirt that says, just do it, convulses as he watches father dragged away by armed officers. A mother gets down on her knees, ties her daughter's shoes, not knowing if she will ever tie them again. As I hold Chanda, my smile crumbles. All I hear is the maddening, blinding roar of children crying, women weeping, grown men groaning. This is the last poem for the reading and also the last poem in The Doctor Will Fix It. And it's a love poem for my wife, and the book is dedicated to her. Poetry doesn't sell. It doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't pay for your auto and life insurance, your medical bills and mortgage expenses. It doesn't send your children to college or set up your retirement fund. It doesn't help a friend dying of cancer. It doesn't fix a leaking roof, help buy a brand new car. It doesn't even mean what it says half the time. Poetry is your daughter looking up, saying daddy for the first time. It is after apple picking one afternoon in a tiny studio near the university. You and your girlfriend were making sandwiches and you touch her hand. She turned around, rests her head on your chest. You breathe in her autumn hair. She smelled so sweet, tender and warm. It wasn't the Macy perfume we bought her last Christmas. It was her. Right then you knew she would be the mother of your daughter. And of course, now I have a son, so I feel like I need to write more poems for my son. I think that's it. I look forward to meeting everyone virtually on Zoom, to hearing, your thoughts about the poetry and really listening carefully to your questions. Yeah, it's 12 o'clock now, midnight, and it's Thursday night, Friday morning. Thanks. I look forward to meeting you, and hopefully I'll meet you in person. That would be wonderful. Adirondack is not far from where I live. So anyway, thank you again, and thanks for your interest in my poetry and for for all of this. Okay, goodbye.